Alright, now I'm continuing with scene file impact 3 ready to cache because I'm ready to cache. I've got my simulation working pretty much the way I want. I've got a little play blast here we can take a look. So yeah, at this point I'm pretty happy with it. I made a couple of minor cosmetic changes to the scene file since we last looked at it, but it's pretty much the same simulation. So yeah, so now I'm ready to cache this out and then begin the rendering and compositing process. Now there's another reason I want to cache this out. If we actually slow this down for a second. Now depending on what you're doing, you might not care about this, but if you look closely, you can see here's one of my bullet particles, approaches the wall, hits the wall. When it collides with the wall, you see it creates the crater particle, and then a frame later my instance geometry appears. The reason that's happening, and you see that it happens on every collision, the reason that's happening is because I'm using a particle collision event. And with collision events you can't use creation expressions. That's the reason why I'm using runtime expressions to drive everything. So because I'm using a runtime expression to drive my instance geometry appearance, yeah, just everything is lagging behind one frame because we're using runtime expressions rather than creation expressions. But that's fine because after I cache this out, I can go back to my cache and I can offset the timing, and then that doesn't become a problem anymore. Alright, so let's set this up. Alright. So to set up the cache is easy. I'm just going to select all of my dynamic objects, well, my particles. So I select my bullet particle, my crater particle, and my sparks particle. And I just come up here and cache, create new cache. And I'm going to select one file per frame and one file per object. This is good. This is going to create cache files for each of my selected objects here. Time slider, evaluate one frame, lovely. Alright, click on create, Maya goes through and it generates my cache. It just takes a minute. This is a nice simple scene, so it doesn't take too long. Obviously, if you've got a larger scene with millions of particles, it's going to take longer to generate your cache files. And cache files can take up a lot of drive space, but if you need a cache file, you need a cache file. Alright, awesome. My cache is set up, and so now the nice thing about this is I can come in, I can scrub in the timeline, which is awesome. You can't scrub in the timeline otherwise. So yeah, that's really good. But like I said, I've got this minor lagging problem. There's a good example of it right there. Bullet comes in, collides, no instance geometry shows up a frame later. Alright, so I want to fix this. So easiest way to fix this is, now the problem is with my crater particle, because my crater particle is the one that has the instance attached to it. So I'm going to select my crater particle, open up the attribute editor, and find the cache file that's associated with it. There's the cache file. Now one thing, you'll notice in here, in the cache file, there's source start, source end, original start, original end. You could try adjusting the timing here. I personally, this never seems to work for me. It looks like it works, but doesn't render out properly. That might be a problem with this node talking to mental-ray as a renderer. So I'm not even going to touch these guys. I'm going to do something that I know is going to work. So I'm going to select that cache file, and I'm going to create a little shading network to fix this. Shading networks are good. Oops, it's a little big. Whoops. Hypershade. Just that. Alright, and show the up and downstream connections. Alright, so there's my cache file. And you can see right now that my cache file is connected to time. So here's time, there's my cache file, and there's the crater shape. Great, so what I want to do is I want to mess around a little bit with the time value that's going into my cache file. I want to offset that a little bit. which is actually really easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plus minus average node. So again, I just go create general utilities plus minus average node, and there's my plus minus average node. Now the plus minus average node is a very powerful, very useful node to work with. At first glance, it can be a little cryptic, considering that what it does is actually quite simple. It does some pretty simple math. But basically what it lets you do is simple mathematical operations like add and subtract. I'm going to work with the 2D input because it's nice and easy to work with. So I'm going to click on Add New Item twice. So this gives me a couple of points that I can jump into with. Alright, so now I'm just going to connect the time output from my time node into this input here. So I'll drag this over and we select out time. And so I want that to be, like I said, input 2D 0, so input 2D. There we go. So connect that, so notice there's my time. Close that, and we can see, yeah, we're at frame 95, and that's what it's telling me, frame 95. One thing, at least on my graphics card, it doesn't actually show the connection. It's there, but it doesn't show up. Okay, cool. So now I want to connect my plus minus average node to the input on my creator. So if we come over here, we can see that it's just the time input, so that's fine. So pick you, and other. So select my output 2D X, and I just want to find time, plug that in, lovely. Alright, great, so now, and again, don't worry about the fact that we can't see the connection there. So right now, if we go back to my plus minus average node, I'm not adding anything to my time value. So the simulation plays exactly the way it did before. Let me just slide this over a little bit. Plays exactly the way it did before. See, there's a bullet particle. It's about to collide. Collides, and then we see our instance geometry. So I'm going to adjust this. I'm going to say, no, I want to add a frame to that. I want to offset the timing of my cache by 1 frame. So now, if we come back, we can see, see? My particle hasn't collided yet, but already, or my bullet particle hasn't collided yet, but we can see the crater particle show up, and then a frame later, my instance geometry shows up. Now, if I render this, you'll see that this, as far as the renderer is concerned, this still lags behind by frame. So I'm actually going to cheat some more, and I'm going to increase this by 2. Which will look funny here, but when I render it, it'll be perfect. And I can do the same thing. Like right now, my sparks will be lagging behind a little bit, so I can connect my sparks as well to my plus minus average node. So let's see, pick my sparks. There's my sparks cache. Select it. Grab you. So there we go. So yeah, same thing as we had before. So now time is connected to, well, sparks like it was before. So I'm just going to connect the output of my plus minus average node to my sparks cache file, just like I did before. Other. So output 2D 2x to time. Perfect. So now my instance geometry, my craters and my sparks both have their caches offset. And now that I've set up this cache, I'm all set to go to render and comp.